Well, good afternoon or good morning, ladies and gentlemen, whenever you're watching this video. But I thought we would run a little call here. This is an Oxbox. Congratulations, gentlemen. This is an Oxbox. First one I've run up on. This is a Trane product, Ingersoll Rand. Good old Trane. Entering the builder's grade market. Yes, a Trane brand right there on the tag. I know there's some people out there that are proud of that. But anyway, the reason we're at this house is, well, this system was installed 2 years ago. It was supposed to be a dual fuel system, but whoever installed it set it up as a straight AC with a gas furnace, and we have a heat pump out here. Zone board will not operate, the one that's installed anyway, from what I understand, a dual fuel system. So we've got to put in a new zone board, come out here and put an outdoor temperature sensor so we can set our temperature lockouts for our heat transition from heat pump to gas, compressor lockout. Probably won't set a compressor lockout here in North Carolina, it doesn't get that cold. And then we've got to put a discharge air sensor on the supply plenum to get this thing operating properly. So enjoy the ride, gentlemen. And yes, a Trane Oxbox. It's got to be making Mr. Cook proud. All right, guys, we're up in the attic now, getting ready to swap out this Ultrazone EWC board. So we've got a single stage furnace over here, carrier. We didn't get that replaced, but we did replace the air conditioner with an Oxbox heat pump, but we didn't put in a zone panel that could run dual fuel. This is a heat pump panel, but it doesn't allow me to specify on this particular panel whether we've got electric or gas backup heating, which means if it calls for auxiliary heating while the heat pump's on, this furnace is going to come on. It's going to blast that 120 degree air through this coil in heat mode, and your head pressures are just going to go bonkers. You could put a mechanical thermostat on it, run the Y signal through the outdoor temperature switch. When that switch closes, reroute that circuit back in here to start the furnace. But he's got zoning on the house, so we're just going to go ahead and get this set up where it needs to be. So we're going to put in that board over there, which allows us to go in at the 432, which is a 4-zone 3 heat 2 cool board. And it allows you to go in and set up all that stuff for whatever you want. Basically whatever equipment you're looking at, you can do that. But here's your Oxbox coil right here, Oxbox, and it's got a piston on it, a piston, bag of pistons here. I sure hope they remember to stick one in there. I guess it came with multiple pistons. We'll find out when I get it running and check the charge on it. But anyway, let's get this. Yeah, it says a number 90 piston on it, so obviously I have to pump it down to pull that out. I'm not going to. We're just going to check the charge on it and hope they at least got that part of the setup right. But yeah, anyway, they didn't put the right zone board in, so this thing is basically set up for straight AC gas. He's got a heat pump outside, so we're gonna get this all squared away. But yeah, it's my first time ever working on an Oxbox system. Gotta tell you, interesting. Can't believe Trane did that mess. But anyway, we're gonna get these wires, trying to get this camera where it sits in the right spot. So yeah, I have to use my glasses and need to be able to look through all this. So zone 2 here, I'm gonna have to assume that's gonna be our upstairs zone, because they are not using different colors, which is what I would typically do. That way I know which ones. You got red and white going to both your zone damper motors over there. So I mean, I can check continuity on them and figure out which one goes where. But we're gonna say this one is hooked up to here, this one's hooked up to there. So I'm gonna have zone 1 and zone 2. And we'll put those over to the side. Well, I got to take them out of here anyway, so we're going to go ahead and get that one out of the way. I ain't worried too much about figuring out the zoning. It's not that hard to figure out which damper goes to which floor and get the right one connected to the right zone. You just gotta make sure you got the right thermostat connected to the right zone, which that's just turning it on, running one, running the thermostats, closing, turning one off, and seeing which floor closes. And if it's the right floor, you're good. If it's not, then oh well. And I also see, I'm not guessing they put a secondary transformer in this thing either, so that was awful sweet of them. So we have an air sensor connected here on this board, and it's going to go right there. If it's a 10K sensor, I should be able to reuse that with the Trane, or maybe not, I don't know, but we'll see. So I'm going to tuck my sensor back here so I know that that one goes to my sensor. And these two go to my zone motors. And now we've got our equipment right here. And yeah, that Oxbox actually is like a Ream product in the sense that it energizes. That was going to be my transformer. It's going to be my equipment right there. It energizes the reversing valve in heat. So I'm going to put my equipment wires there so I know where they're at. Then I'm going to have two thermostats. I've also got to redo the thermostats due to the fact that he has Nest thermostats that were also wired up for straight AC, one heat, one cool, and they're Nest, and that's what he wants on the house. So we're going to leave them there. They do have an OB terminal, so I can go in and set that up. And then what I can do with that Honeywell zone board is I can set it up to kind of control the equipment when it calls for auxiliary, how to deal with all that. So there's the zone 1 thermostat right there. And we'll put zone 2 right above it. And I'm going to guess that this is going to be my, this is the upstairs. So this is going to be my upstairs zone right here, and that's going to be my downstairs zone. So anyway, I mean, zoning's not bad. I mean, it is what it is. The systems aren't designed for zoning, obviously. But it can help out in older houses. You know, if you've got a 4-ton unit on a house and it's been doing the whole house all these years, upstairs and downstairs, and you'd have to go in and make modifications and changes if you wanted to split it into 2 separate systems, 2-ton systems or something like that. So you can, older house, sometimes that's difficult to do, so you can put a zoning system on it and set up the ductwork where you can get your dampers installed and add that second thermostat upstairs. And help keep that airflow or the temperatures in that house balanced a little better. But the units are not designed to run with it, so you have to be careful about that. Make sure your airflow is good, your bypasses are set up like they're supposed to be. Your airflow is good. And here is our new zone board. I can make sure my wires are all gonna reach, so I'm gonna drop this thing just a little bit lower And the other one was, I went to the phone. Get that thing out of there. But I'm gonna drop it. Okay guys, we got everything wired up. Now I need to go to my Nest thermostats and tie in my O. Well, it'll be B in this case because of the Oxbox. Trying to be a ream. But anyway, I got to go tie in my O terminals, reset up the thermostats for heat pump operation. Then come up here and set up this in my configuration menu, how I want it to operate. And we're going to use the outdoor temperature sensor to control my lockouts. More than likely, I'm just going to set a lockout in this thing that above 40 degrees, we're running the heat pump. Below 40 degrees, we're going to run the gas, and just leave it at that. It's the simplest way to do it. Did have to go over here and add a secondary transformer because they also did not do that. You don't want to run the zoning control off of the equipment, especially a furnace transformer. If it's a small transformer, you're going to have an issue with coming over here. And I guess the easiest way to explain it is you run power to this zone board, you tie in a transformer. Now that transformer is going to power your zone board, it's going to power your thermostats, and it's also going to control the power on your damper motors when they open and close. At that point, this board just basically acts like a relay with the equipment, 24 volts, and relays it to your furnace, your outdoor unit, your reversing valve, your fan, whatever you're trying to do to control the system, and the equipment still runs off its transformer. If you try to overload the transformer in the air handler or the furnace, especially if it's not big enough transformer, you're going to burn up the transformer. You're going to have voltage loss issues with this thing. So just keep that in mind. A secondary transformer is going to power your thermostats, your damper motors. These are damper motors that power close and spring open. The old Honeywells are still here. The metal box, we all know probably 3 weeks after we leave here, one of these is going to stick closed and then the other one's going to stick closed. That's what happens. The spring corrodes in them. After a while, they lock up and it'll close, and then it just won't unwind and spring back open when that voltage is dropped from the thermostat for that zone. So you want to, you know, keep an eye on these kind of damper motors. They stick on you a lot. But anyway, we now have a board set up. I had to do some wiring in there to bring common over here. Made a few changes. So now we're going to set the thermostats up where they need to be at, and go wire the outdoor unit, get it tied in, and turn this thing on, and hopefully it works, and hopefully those Nest thermostats will function like we need to. But I think I can set this board up to control those things if it's not going to work right. All right, gentlemen, we're back outside with the world famous Oxbox from Trane. Making their splash with the aftermarket. So I've got the power turned off upstairs in the attic still. I did cycle it on real quick, made sure I didn't have any of the shorts or fuses blowing, and everything was ready to function up there. Still got to do the thermostats. We're going to get this outdoor unit wired up real quick. Disconnect is already out. So the Oxbox works like a ream in the fact that it is, you see he was using white up there for Y and using yellow for red. I've changed all that to pretty much standard, the way I like things to be, which is going to be obviously my R for 24, my blue for common, and I'm going to use my Y yellow. I'm going to use orange for my reversing valve, but that's going to go to my blue over here for B, and to energize and heat. And then I typically will use my black to go back in for my auxiliary heating when it goes into defrost, to go back in there and energize. But I think I'm going to set that up in that furnace or that zone board a little differently. I just want to be sure that when this thing goes through defrost cycle that we're not kicking on the furnace and having to make sure that you want to make sure that you don't want to have the furnace running the same time as the heat pump, things like that. So you just want to be careful. But with everything set up properly, that should work. I've done this before. It'll be fine. But I just like my wires at the outdoor unit to kind of be universal to what somebody else is going to be. Somebody else comes out here, they're going to kind of be familiar with the way things are wired up, not using funky colors. So I'm going to get this thing wired up real quick. Then I'm going to run my outdoor sensor back in. More than likely I'm going to do that with, we'll just use green and brown and be done with it. I'm going to tie that thing back in. So anyway, get all this stuff wired up. Yeah, I haven't worked on an Oxbox before, so be interested to see how it runs, see what it sounds like. I'll be interested to I'm curious to see how long the thing's gonna last, to tell you the truth. So black out here, according to our wiring diagram on this one, our common is going to be our black, so that's going to be blue, because it's going to be everything else inside is Honeywell and this, that, and the other, so it's going to all match up there. It'll just look a little, you get out here and it'll look a little funny. Usually on the Trane units, why they did this, I don't know why they didn't just stick with a normal reversing valve. Energize the thing in cooling. It's typically on those defrost boards, your black is there. It's going to be your wire that goes back in for your auxiliary heating to come on when you're in defrost cycle. So anyway, trash man making his rounds. Get our wire tied in, trim these off and make new fittings. Those have been, well, they've been taken apart 3 or 4 times. The wires are all knotted and twisted and you can't get the wire nut on there snug. It wants to stay loose, fall off. So we're going to redo that. Then I'm going to have to add a couple of reverse wire nuts. Like I said, they had this thing wired up for straight AC. I don't know why you put a heat pump on a house and you don't set it up for dual fuel operations. Is beyond me, but it is what it is. So now our blue and purple, our purple is going to be our auxiliary. There's one that's here. It's going to be our auxiliary going back in, and we're going to tie that in to our black. So when it goes in defrost, this will go back into that board. That board will cycle on that furnace while it's running in defrost mode to cancel out that cold air. And then obviously we now have our blue for our reversing valve for heat. And like I said, I don't know why Trane would do something like this, but it is, like I said, what it is. I'm not thinking we're ever going to sell one of these to anybody, and I most definitely don't plan on buying one, so this may be the first and last time that I deal with one of these. But you got to be familiar with everything. You can't just show up and see Trane on a unit and assume that it's going to be a energizing cooling like everything else that they make, because it does not. I need to figure out where I want to bring this sensor in at. and tie it in. Okay, so what you see I've done is got everything wired up out here about the way it should be, and I've added this right there, Honeywell outdoor temperature sensor, to tie back into that zone board so I can go in there and set my lockouts between the heat pump and the furnace. So let's go in there now and get that thermostat, or both of those Nest thermostats, wired up right and see what this thing is going to do. So anyway, I don't know what's going on. My camera's acting funny. But anyway, like I said, Nest thermostats have been more of a nuisance problem. I said I've replaced more of them than I've installed. And I've gone back and replaced ones that I have installed within a year or two sometimes. So they act up. And there's somebody here that didn't pay attention to, I wanted to cut thermostat wire and make it a mile long. You got to cram it behind the thermostat. So here we go. We're just going to trim it off, make it fit. So anyway, you guys have installed thermostats before. I'm not going to make a whole 5-minute section in this video about doing that, but I've got a G, a R, a OB terminal, a W, a C, and a Y on this, so should be able to set this up for dual fuel, or at least set it up where it'll run properly, and then I'll let the control board, the zone board upstairs, control the staging from the heat pump to the furnace, and we'll just do a simple lockout, temperature lockout on it, and that typically works perfectly fine with a single stage furnace and a single stage heat pump. If I had, you know, multiple stages, 2-stage outdoor unit, 2-stage indoor unit, 3-stage indoor unit, and we would do something a little different. All right, I'll be back when we get ready to set that board up. Okay guys, we got everything powered up. Still haven't put the thermostats up. I have to set those up, but I do have them wired. I'm going to come over and get this zone. So we're going to go to configuration, system type. It's going to be a heat pump. Dual fuel operations, yes, because we have a heat pump. Gas backup, so we're going to make sure that's yes. Compressor stages, we have a single stage heat pump outside. We have a single stage furnace up here. We're not using the RF enabled, like a communicating wireless thermostat or any other devices like that, so we're going to leave that at no. The zones installed, we have 2. We have a heat pump, but we're going to use B because it's energizes in heat, not cooling. Same for the second thermostat. Go into the advanced configurations, heat fan control, panel, purge time 2 minutes, fan and purge, let the panel control that. Purge dampers unchanged, we're going to leave that as it is. Changeover delay 20 minutes. That's if somebody's got one thermostat on cooling and one's on heating. It'll do a 20-minute delay. The last function, if one thermostat ran to heat and it satisfied, the other one calls for cooling, it's going to put a 20-minute delay on that. I don't recommend running thermostats in opposite modes with zoning, but it's possible. Discharge sensor installed, yes. DAT, we're going to set our high limit at 160, so if it gets above 160 in the plenum, the blower quits or damper motor sticks, whatever happens. If it gets above 160 in heat mode, it'll shut the equipment off. And if it gets below 35 in cooling mode, if one of those things happens, to prevent a freeze up, it'll cycle it off. And once the temperature stabilizes back, it'll turn everything back on. And then outdoor temperature balance, we're going to set that at 40 degrees. So that's going to be our lockout. Below 40 degrees, it's going to run the furnace. Above 40 degrees, it's going to run the heat pump. And that's just our lighting contrast. We are good to go. That's our purge. That's why you hear the blower coming on. We're going to cycle that off. So right here now we're going to go through our checkout operations. It's telling me our outdoor temperature sensor there. Whether you can see it, it's reading 69 degrees. Tells me our DAT sensor on our supply plenum is reading 72 degrees, which is about what it is inside the house. You hear the blower running. So now we're going to test heat 1. Let's go back and cancel our purge real quick. Let that blower shut off. And we're going to go through our test modes real quick with the zone board and check each thing kind of one at a time. It'll cycle on the heat pump, the blower, cycle on the furnace. Waiting for the time to play on that carrier furnace. You gotta love it. But I'm gonna go ahead and go into our configuration. We've already got everything set up, our checkout mode. So right there, like I said, it's telling us our outdoor temperature is 69 degrees. It's telling us our supply temperature is 70 degrees from our sensor. So now we're going to do our test. Heat 1. Blower comes on. It's going to cycle the outdoor unit in heating. I have the disconnect out there. But now we're going to go to our second heat stage, which is going to be our gas auxiliary. Alright, we hear the furnace. We hear the inducer motor coming on. Furnace will fire off. So we're going to go back to the off mode. Now we're going to test the emergency heat. Cooling 1, we have 1 stage of cooling. Test the fan. Fan's already running, but you can test it. So you make sure you go back and turn all these back off. Go through them. It'll go through it. It'll cycle your damper motors one at a time. Zone 2. And then now we need to go hook up our thermostats. We're going to exit the checkout, and I'm going to go put those thermostats on the wall and see what they look like, change the setting on those, and then we're going to turn this thing on and go check the charge outside. Okay guys, follow up on this call with the zoning. Got all that work done, everything rewired, set up, sensor, DAT sensors, outdoor sensor, all that stuff connected, reinstalled, set up properly on the equipment side. And what happens, you get to the Nest thermostats to go in and try to reconfigure them for the equipment and what you're trying to do with it now. They were set up as 1 heat, 1 cool. I need them to be 2 heat, 1 cool, with auxiliary heating being a gas backup. Dual fuel setup, single stage both ways. And you can't do it in those thermostats directly. Like every other thermostat that you can go into and reconfigure it for whatever equipment that you're hooking it up to. This one you have to go through the homeowner's Google Home app to do that. And guess who wasn't home? The homeowner. Left the door unlocked. Now he's not answering the phone. So we're 2 hours later right now and he still has not called me back. These people just blow my mind. They want all this done. They're not home when you're there. And then when you try to call them to get some information, hey, I need you to go in your app, give me access to it so I can set this up, they don't answer the phone. So he's still stuck with what he had after paying all that money for zone boards and sensors and getting everything set up properly to operate the equipment he had, because the last company that installed it put a heat pump on it and set everything up for 1 heat, 1 cool conventional, and didn't change anything or configure it for actual heat pump. So he knows that's what he has, that's what he wants now, to get it set up where it works that way, but he doesn't answer the phone and he's not home. And a damn Nest thermostat, guys, a damn Nest thermostat holding up progress. Nest thermostats suck from one end of the earth to the other. You gotta love them, guys.